Today, we are going to talk about how to actually captivate your audience. And your audience could be your child, your audience could be your team, your audience could be standing up on a stage in front of 500 people. It could be a group of adjusters. It can be whatever you want your audience to be. And so I'm just going to give you 10 tips that I think that I've worked over the years for myself, as well as a couple of the different types of speakers that exist. I'm going to give you guys 4 different facades, and you can figure out either which one you tend to gravitate to best, but also to understand what makes you special is going to be completely different than anybody else, because you are uniquely you. And this is when you are trying to impact your audience, the more authentic you can be, the better. So I am Dr. Claire Muselman. I'm happy to be here with you today when I am not trying to spread some glitter and sparkles throughout the insurance industry. I am the Chief Risk Officer at Emory Industrial. I am also a massive contributor to Bloom because I love Bloom, and it is a wonderful platform. If you have not already started following it, please do so. And then I also like to spend time with students at Drake University, of which I do teach business communication. So not using any of the stuff from that class though. So kind of funny. I think I saw Ryan Beach on here who also gets to co-teach with me with that. And we were not covering any of those lectures today. But with that, I hope you can walk away understanding that whatever is unique to you and the tidbits that you can take away that are going to make this relevant to who you are with what audience you are portraying this in any type of information to. I hope that this really resonates with you, and do it with your own style. Like I like to be the big glitter and sparkles. I wear ridiculous heels. I always have a big necklace on. I like glitter. That is kind of my thing. I hope you can figure out what your thing is so that when people are around you, they have, like, you've got your own brand. And that's one of the things that we can think about. So today, every presentation gives you time and the ability to change somebody's opinion, thoughts, or provide influence over something. So the time that we spend together when we're giving presentations or we're interacting or collaborating in groups is imperative, because time is such a fixed commodity that we really have to think about the time of people who are coming to work with us as well as those that are coming to hear us. So we've got this ability to influence perceptions and perspectives. And, in the world that we live in now, everybody has an opinion, everyone has a perspective, and you can share it out in a multitude of ways. But when you bring people together to try and cultivate a shared vision around a topic, this is where what kind of an impact can resonate with your audience. And so while we try and think about shape shifting through different types of messaging and different types of influence and different types of perspective, there's a few different ways that we're going to go through to figure out how to make the most impact with the time you have. And this is all done through the power of influence. So let's think about some of your scopes of influence that we've had in life. So when we think about who's had influence over us, let's start with the basics: parental influence. Parents try to influence our behavior. I actually said it to my daughter this morning. I'm like, make good choices. Like, just please make good choices as you are a teenager. Like, we try to influence behavior because we think we know what's best for someone, and our parents did the same thing for us. So when we're looking at how we look at influence and how that's structured, parents are an easy one to revert back to. Teachers are also, they're trying to give the best advice, the best wisdom, trying to formulate curriculum on a path that's going to help you through your academic scope, but even more so, how to be socially, behaviorally acceptable. And so, teachers' main goal is to create functional, contributing members of society by the time you've exited academia. And so influencing thoughts and behavioral patterns as a result of that. Then when you think about your whole scope of work, our bosses obviously influence our behavior. I was actually having coffee with a friend this morning who I used to work with, who we were talking about some of our fear-based mentality because of bosses who had scoped us before, and how that influence has kind of shaped how we show up to work every day. We were specifically talking about how the pandemic has really influenced how people lead, as well as how people manage their time. So if you ever had a boss that was like, you're not green on your chat box, are you even at your computer? We've kind of navigated into a different scenario coming out of COVID or the pandemic that really showcases, people can do their work wherever they want, whenever they want, with the time periods that they have. So thinking about the influence that goes into that. Then also your social norms that exist within your colleagues. So you create this own culture and the influence that surrounds the culture within your own teams and your dynamics based upon what you guys accept as socially acceptable. So we teach people how to treat us, what we'll tolerate, what we won't tolerate, the language that will allow people to use, kind of just how you show up as yourself. And then our clients also influence our behavior. And then think about TV. Mari and I were just talking about this because I'm reading a book about just kind of the influence alcohol has had on us as a society. And TV is a massive influencer of this. So we are thinking about how a lot of times you've got people with drinks in their hands at all points. Now, do people really drink that heavily? Is that really a thing? And just looking at like what the messaging is that comes in from an influential standpoint of, for example, we were talking about Grace and Frankie and always having a martini in the hand. So there's a lot of subliminal messaging that comes in, kind of like when a Starbucks cup got accidentally left on a scene in Game of Thrones, or the fact that MacBooks get used quite a bit. And so there's always this like underlying influential factors that go towards audience engagement. And then you look at social media, there's a lot of dollars paid for influencers to try and target their audience and trying to influence what products to buy, what skincare to use, what toys for children to play with. There's just a lot that goes into that. And then we have our friends. Of course, our friends want to influence our personal agendas and whatnot, because our friends influence kind of what we do from a social standpoint, what we find to be socially acceptable, because these end up being our tribes. And what does that look like from that kind of a landscape? So the why influence exists and how it exists ends up coming into a lot of different scopes that we have been ingrained with, and that has also transitioned from generation to generation to generation. So some of the thought patterns and beliefs or perceptions that you might have could have been ingrained not only from your parents and your influence there, but also because of their parents. And so when you think about it from that capacity, the relationship with money tends to be a generational derivative from time period to time period to time period. So as we think about influence, just keep those factors that we have been influenced by throughout our careers and lifetimes as we move forward. So there are 10 ways that you can actually really drive impact through your audience. And so we're going to hit all of them today. I will try and be somewhat quick because I want to keep you guys on our time slot today, but going through these, we're going to start by asking people what they want. So when you're coming into a platform where you're going to be cultivating some type of change or a meeting, or you're going to have some type of an audience, we got to ask people what they're looking for. Like, what do you expect to get out of it? This is why you see a lot of people start with the objectives for this presentation are the following, or the objective of today's meeting is the following, because you're trying to set the tone of what is going to happen. And then is there anything else that wants to be covered? Or is there any time that you want to have for questions? What does that look like? Common sense is not so common anymore. As much as we want to say things people should just inherently know, they don't. It is an interesting conundrum that we've been talking about on a more frequent basis, that common sense really isn't that common anymore. And so then take that perspective and shift it and do a mirror approach to yourself. What would it take to actually influence you? Like, are you someone who is influenced by an Instagram ad where you're like, yes, I absolutely want that new glowing nightlight to wake up instead of my from my cell phone alarm? Like, what does it take to actually influence you? What are the algorithms that would actually work for yourself? So when we think about how we're going to ask an audience, like, what do you need from me? So how can I help you and make a difference on this topic or issue? A lot of times setting the tone in advance. Like, you know that you're going to set aside an hour or 90 minutes to cover a topic that either you're being asked to speak about, or you're asked by your team or your organization or another group to come and speak about. Like, how can I help you? What's going to be a good takeaway? What do you want to get out of this? And how can my experiences and my life help enhance your perspective on this? What are the questions or frustrations or challenges that you want me to actually talk about? Because a lot of times when we get into this polished perspective, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, into people want authentic communicators. They want people that aren't afraid to challenge the status quo, that aren't afraid to talk about their failures. And so when we talk about what challenges do you want me to address, people want to hear, where have you failed? Where have those potholes been that you didn't see coming? Because again, it's kind of like an influential mentorship where, hey, I'm going to tell you about the things that didn't go really well so that you can avoid those moving forward. And then what are the 3 most important areas you'd like me to cover today? We just did this with some planning within my own team where it was like, okay, let's give us our top 3 agenda items. All right, What are we going to talk about today? What are going to be those 3 driving factors that'll make when you leave here, you are going to feel like this meeting was worthwhile and this meeting was worth having. Then we look at the power of why, communicating the why. Humans can gather change management in any capacity if you start with the why. They can wrap their head around pretty much anything that you're going to throw at them, from a change dynamic or anything that's going to be coming at them that's going to either change the trajectory of their job, change the trajectory of what's going on in their personal life. If you can explain the why and give them a rational answer. Why do something? Well, we're going to do this because X, Y, or Z. And you start to go the outside in. You start with the how, the why, and then you move into the how, and then finishing up with the what it actually is. So if we're going to start, let's use exercise as an easy example. Like, we are going to start exercising. Well, why are we going to start exercising? Well, because it's going to improve your health. It's going to improve your mood. It's going to help set the stage for a great day. How are we going to do that? We're going to set our alarm half an hour earlier than we're currently doing it. And then what are we going to do? We're going to go run. We're going to go dance. We're going to go to kickboxing. We're going to go lift weights, etc. The wiring, the way that the human brain works, is that cerebral cortex needs to understand what's going on first before it can really wrap your head around whatever else is going to transpire as a result. So understanding the why and that cause and effect, that because we're going to do it this way, this is how it's going to happen. And this is the why that explains what we're going to have happen. So if you're going to change the way that a policy or a procedure is written, we're going to change something at work where we're going to start doing something a different way. Well, why? Help articulate what that impact is going to be as a result. People will really come along with you. But we've got to start with that power of why. Again, no matter what kind of change management you're going to inflict on people or being that outside factor in, understanding that why is the most imperative component of this. Then we got to go to likability. Birds of a feather flock together. There's a reason for that. I like to call this the Iowa nice effect. So if you're from Iowa, like Marin on today's call, the Iowa nice thing is the real thing. People who are speaking, when you're trying to captivate an audience, likability matters. So that's kind of where that authenticity component is really, really, really important. But this is also where, as a speaker or as someone who's leading the meeting or someone who's trying to articulate change or being that captivator and impacting your audience, trying to find common ground with the people that are there. Like if you're in the Midwest, find some type of commonality with that. Ideally, you want to try and find 3 connection pieces. And so when you can have that common ground or that shared camaraderie with whomever your audience is, you're going to get a better positive response, and they're going to be more susceptible to what you are talking about. One of the ways you can do this, if you have a smaller group that you're going to be working with, I like to start out with, tell me 3 good things about what's going on in your world right now. It gets people to have a positive mindset. They are genuinely engaged because they have to think about something that's going on in their world. They can share it with other people. And then there are connection points that can be made as a result of that. And so you as the speaker, I love doing this, especially when I'm teaching, because someone will say, oh, like I went to the football game this weekend. I'm like, oh, I like football. And you can find these little tiny connection points that help establish the likability factor, because you have a likeness like this person. So we're not so different after all. We're not, at the end of the day. We're all humans. We're all humans just trying to be. And there's a lot of things that we share that are in common with one another. So thinking about it from that perspective. When people are listening to you, we don't want them to have to do the work. Ambiguity is not your friend when you're trying to impact your audience. Your children are a really good example of this. Remember, time is valuable. So if people are going to tune in, they want to get something out of this. So ambiguity is not your friend. We always need to start out with, like, why are you qualified to be speaking about this? Or why are you the one that's going to tell us about whatever topic this might be? Why are you the one that's going to be influencing this change that's coming from work? Or why are you trying to tell me X, Y, or Z, mom or dad? So you've got to make sure that you've got the right facts. And I love going back to objective facts, not the subjective feelings, but like, show me the data, tell me the facts. If you've ever had to build a business case, this is where this becomes very important. But people like to have, again, understanding the why. Well, if you've got actual data to support that, it's even more imperative. But also, most complex concepts that we are going to articulate to an audience or to other people should be able to be summarized in 90 seconds. That's about the attention span that your brain's going to be able to function at. So if you can't break down a concept that is challenging to understand within 90 seconds, then you don't know it well enough to be able to be teaching it. So something to think about with that. Can you make a hard concept easily digestible and able to consume within 90 seconds? Coming from the claims world in workers' compensation, there's a lot of challenging statutes, a lot of challenging laws and regulations. Being able to take a complex component and breaking it down into 90 seconds, that's about the attention span you're going to get from an injured worker. So there's a lot of ways you can transition this into your position or with the people that you're working with. Making things easy to understand. Of course, we want information to be consumable. That's why people are coming to listen to you, whatever that audience looks like for you. We need that attention. You've got to captivate that attention and draw it in. So your energy, your tone, what is the relevancy to your position, or why are people coming here? What do they want to know about? How do they want to be able to relate to you? And you got to get that message established early. So like today, we're talking about making an impact to your audience. Like what can people walk away from feeling that because they were with you for that 20 minutes, that half hour, that hour, 90 minutes, et cetera, that they are better as a result of spending time with you during that. So you get that message established early, and then you continue to reiterate that theme throughout. You make simple and clear examples. A lot of times we talk about storytelling, and then you leave with giving an ask. Okay, so we're done. We've talked about this. Like today, we're talking about impacting your audience. So then what comes next for you? What are the steps that you will take after you walk away from today to go start influencing your own life to help impact others? And a lot of this becomes from design. So if you think about going back to the old paragraph, when we were starting to write paragraphs back in the day when we were younger, you always had your topic sentence, you'd support it with some facts, and then you'd summarize it again. Well, think about that from like the rule of three. So you've got your, hey, this is what I'm going to tell you. Here are the things I'm going to tell you about, and this is what I just told you. So it's very similar structure. It's a structure we talk about on a regular basis where, all right, make that sandwich. Here's your topic. What are the facts you're going to describe? Then you describe them, and then you summarize what you just did. So you're continuously reiterating through different stories, different examples, or different concepts, those three factors or whatever your sandwich looks like, to then wrap it up and tell people what you just told them. Because think about the last time you've gone to a doctor's appointment. We retain about 30% of what is said within a doctor's appointment because there's a plethora of other factors going on. Well, when we're sitting in a meeting or when we're coming in to hear a speaker, there's a lot of outside factors going on. Whatever's transpired this morning, for me, caffeine intake is going to be a big one. And then what else in the world is occupying your mind within that space? So when we talk about making things consumable, making sure that it's valuable and easy to understand, the ways that we reiterate and we tell the same concepts throughout our speaking engagement or throughout whatever type of audience you're working with is going to be important, because people are only going to retain bits and pieces of it just by the way that we're wired and the receptibility that we are coming into that space with. This is another reason why if you have a smaller, more intimate group where you're going to be teaching something or it's like a team meeting and you want to get people engaged, it's a great time to ask, tell me 3 good things since the last time we were engaged. It helps people clear their mind to focus on, okay, what are some good things that have happened in my life lately? Something that I can share out. You get that instant human connection component with, oh, okay, you did that this weekend, so did I. Or, oh yeah, I've been to that city before. Oh, I love to travel too. You get that instant human connection. But then also people are now in a positive mind frame, and people are more susceptible to be able to retain knowledge and willing to learn through different perspective, different lenses, and different influence as a result of having a positive mindset. When people are negative or they just feel like they have this big jumble of everything that's going on in the world, they aren't going to hear you as easily as if you have a positive mindset. So that shift is imperative when we're starting out to either get people excited about a topic we're going to talk about, or to try and start executing and implementing some change that might impact their lives in a less than desirable capacity. So, the ways that we reiterate it, bringing people in with a good mindset and making sure that it's easy to understand with digestible bites, and reiterating, here's what I'm going to tell you. You tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And we want to think about future forward. So there's a lot that you can learn by the way that people speak. If people speak in past tense, they're usually in a negative headspace. People that speak in the present tense are very focused on like an us versus them dynamic. And people that are future forward tend to be more positive. And so when we're looking at trying to impact our audience, we're looking at those motivational factors of what is going to drive the momentum for what comes next. So we're looking at that future forward. What does that future look like? What could it be? And how do you bring the audience along with you to know that they can do that with you? What does it look like from their lens or their seat? And how do you drive that impact as a result? From a leadership perspective, if you're looking at this for trying to get your team motivated or your organization motivated, people want you to be honest and transparent to the best of your abilities. Now, sometimes there's things that we can't say, but for the most part, we could be pretty honest with people. It's the white lies that end up getting us into a lot of trouble. But when you're looking at trying to captivate an audience and you're doing this from a leadership standpoint, being honest and showcasing where we are headed, what does that future look like? What does the road ahead? How is it paved? And how do you cultivate some inspiring moments to get your team excited about where it's going? I remember talking to the workers recovery unit the very first time when I was like, hey, we're going to build the workers recovery unit and this is what it's going to look like. Our injured workers are going to have the best experience possible when they call in, when they've had an unforeseen circumstance. And this is how we're going to start to change their lives. We're going to single-handedly change the trajectory of their outcomes by navigating our claims in this capacity versus the way it's always been done. And this is what this looks like for you as a result. You're going to have a happier job. Here's why. And you go into the why and you start cultivating this vision of how people are involved in that future dynamic, what it looks like, how it feels, and how it gets people excited. And then you've got to make sure that you know what you're talking about, because, you know, one of the worst things is when you have a leader that's trying to tell you about where you're going and you know that there's so many holes that you could poke in. So being competent is also, you know, we just talked about how common sense isn't so common anymore. So making sure we're competent in the areas that we're going to focus on. And then we're looking at a vision. Vision is such a powerful dynamic. So when you can actually paint that picture in someone's mind that helps them understand how they fit into what change is coming, or where we're going to go, how we're going to get there, what that's going to look like, feel like, this is how you fit into this scenario. You can design it, you can feel it, you can actually see what your life looks like in that moment. Being able to help people conceptualize and visualize what is coming next is a very important component of impacting your audience, because now they get to see things through the lens that you are also sharing with them. And so they get to share in these moments with you. Number 6, so we're halfway through these. Gifts are for giving. So the time, people are giving you their time. So we need to give them a gift back. And when we think about giving this as a gift, it's about how you craft and deliver your presentation. One of my absolute favorite presentations to do, and I'll touch on this with number 10 too, is humanity and claims, because I know that I make people feel something that makes them get excited about what they do again by that presentation. Like there's certain elements that I purposely put in that to make sure that I hit people either at the heartstrings or I get them emotional, because it's a gift of time that makes people feel alive again. So when you craft and deliver what your presentation is going to be, reminding people of what their importance is so that they remember what they're doing, why they're doing it, wherever you're going to try and get them along that vision, it makes them feel acknowledged and it gets them to wake up within their own space. And that's a gift worth giving. And so when you can come at it with a lot of passion and you can try and get that shared vision and that shared passion and excitement and get that commitment from the audience, it's like, yes, I am in this. I am buying into this. Yeah. Okay, let's go do that. I feel good about this. It's all about that presence that you come into that room with. And so when we think about how we give back to our audience, it's not only just captivating that audience, but getting them to remember why they're alive. What are they doing here? Making sure that they feel seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued in that moment that they are spending this time with you. And making sure that your message is powerful. Nobody wants to be boring. Nobody wants to come listen to boring people. I mean, if I wanted to go, I'll go back to my business law class, my very first year of college, where my business law professor read me the textbook. It was the worst class ever. So when we talk about impacting your audience, he definitely left me impacted with, I will absolutely never, ever do that. It was not a gift that I would ever care to give back to someone else. But think about that information that you're sharing. How are you compelling people to try and spark action and impact and influence to make good things happen for people? What does that look like from your seat? So now we're going to spin it around and we're going to take a look at ourselves in the mirror. Self-awareness is so important. This is one of those things that it's like the onion. You can continue to peel back that self-awareness layer. And, perception is always such an interesting thing. And once you think you've figured it out, there's always, human behavior is fascinating. You can think you have it all figured out. And there's always going to be that one-off. There's always going to be something. And I love this because we were teaching business strategy earlier this year. And we're talking about, you can do all these internal analysis. You can do this external analysis. You can pay attention to the audits and, you can try and streamline your communication, your processes. And this is how it's going to look. And human behavior will always come through and throw a wrench in it. So same thing for self-awareness. So I want you guys to think about yourself right now. And if you can see yourself through your camera, pay attention for a second and stare at yourself for a moment. Who do you see when you look back? Do you know the perception that other people get when they also see you? What kind of feelings have you left people feeling? Do people get excited when they're going to see you? Do they kind of try and avoid you? What kind of concepts do you think people feel when they see you, are going to approach you, or know that they're coming to hear you speak? So when we talk about impacting our audience, you've got to really think about it as like a tree. And so the more self-aware you become and the better that you get at understanding the perceptions that you give off, the deeper those roots grow. And the deeper your roots grow, no matter what happens on the surface, no matter what people say, because really at the end of the day, it is none of your business what people think of you. Oh, that's a really hard one to remember. But I actually had someone say that to me once, and I was like, you know what? You are absolutely correct. But it is my responsibility to be aware of the perceptions that I give off. So with that, thinking about how we root, how do we become self-aware? How do we know from that visual standpoint? There was an amazing study that was done over the past 2 years when we were in the pandemic about how words were not being heard through Zoom or through Teams or Google Meets or whatever it was. People were solely looking at judging how people looked. It was like 55% was how people looked. Now remember, we're in the pandemic, and this is where we're starting to get a little bit more authentic. You've got kids going around in the background. You have dogs barking. You've got life happening. And yet like 55% of how we are judging the messaging that's coming across is coming from how people look. Kind of interesting. The next 35% was judged on your tone of voice. So how your tone came across is what people were hearing. And then it goes down to 10% was the actual content itself. Somebody check my math on that. That was 55, 35, 10. Pretty sure I'm right on that. It's a joke. If you know me personally, my mental math is not always the best in the simple concepts of numbers, but self-aware about that. So anyway, rooting of your trees, getting to know yourself, getting to understand that so that no matter what happens on the top level, that the winds or the storms will come, or if you're in the Des Moines or Iowa area, the derecho, there's some stuff that can really rock you. But the more self-aware you are and the more comfortable you get with your self-awareness, the deeper that those roots grow. So these little things don't impact you as much. And so when we take a look at that mirror effect and we really start to realize what perceptions are coming at us and how people perceive us, really diving in, peeling apart those layers and realizing how you are seen is important so that you can then alter whatever you need, morph as you need to, and chameleon, because what works for one group might not work for the next. There are days where if I have to go sit in the boardroom, I'm going to be a stone-faced person. I'm not going to walk in with here comes glitter and sparkles. Yeah, not always going to be received in the right capacity. It's actually why I chose one of my mentors who I did. I chose a mentor who happens to be an older gentleman who has served on a lot of boards. And I know that when I go into a room of Gen Z, I'm going to be received a heck of a lot better than I'm going to when I walk into a room of baby boomers. There's just this perception, and I understand that. It's just getting comfortable with saying, okay, what influence do I want to have? What lenses am I trying to shift? How am I going to effectively do this? And what help can I get from other people to be able to coach me into understanding, okay, This is how you are received. You know this about yourself. Here is more impactful language that will be resourceful for you here versus here. And if you guys have youngers, if you've got Gen Z, or you are working with any of the Generation Alpha or the I generation coming in, they speak a lot differently. And so if you're going to try and make an impact into whatever group you're trying to speak to, impacting your audience, you got to speak their language, but also understand how you're being perceived throughout that process, and being able to flex between whatever groups those are and how you're going to be received with that. One style does not fit all. So there are 4 different main types of communication models. You will have a dominant communication style, and then you have a default communication style. And I'll walk you through those 4 here shortly and figure out which one resonates with you the most. But really the beauty is trying to figure out how to adapt depending on what scenario you're in and what your audience is and how well they're going to receive you. Then you got to make it personal. And I love doing this because you can share every single thing about yourself, and also people have no idea who you are. It's kind of fascinating how this concept works. Again, think about that self-awareness of the tree. The more comfortable you get with knowing your self-awareness, the deeper those roots grow. So whatever happens on top, that tree will withstand the storm. And that's your goal. You want your tree to withstand the storm. So 1, you've got that self-value, self-worth, and you know that you're amazing. But also, can you make that impact? So when we talk about making it personal, all of our lives are different. Everybody has a story. Everyone has a story. There's an activity that I've been doing with groups lately that I learned recently, where we talk about what are the high points of your life, what are the low points of your life, and what have been those pivotal life-changing moments. Every single person's story is different. Everybody's got stuff. And it's fascinating to be able to share with other people kind of those pieces that have made us who we are, and those pivotal moments that have been life-changing. So when you're trying to impact your audience using real stories that have changed the trajectory of your life, or those people that have been that influence, what were those factors? Like I touched on earlier, I had a boss that absolutely looked to see, were you green? You were not green for 15 minutes today. Where were you? That was a pretty impactful moment where you can't get up from your computer when you work from home. Okay, let's talk about what's really going on. Where are these insecurities coming from? There's some serious life stories like that that have shaped how people perceived their work from home dynamic. And a lot of the stories where we look at, like, some people love to work from home, some people don't, some people like to manage virtually, others don't. And we think about the stories of who is telling you this, where is this coming from, why is this happening? Or is this stuff that we inflict on ourselves? And being able to share these stories can help people throughout this process and impact your audience to give those type of personal reflections where, has anyone actually ever said this to me before? Or is this something that I just am automatically thinking because of either a prior experience or a story someone else has shared? Making things personal also relates to current events, what's going on in the world. As much as some of us like to turn off the news, there are still relative events that are going to be shaping society for years to come. And so if you can relate, if you're going to impact that audience and try and drive that meaningful, effective change, sometimes paying attention to those current events is going to be the thing. It's also important when we're making it personal, care. This is probably one of the easiest things to do in life. If you genuinely care about either what you're speaking about, what your role is, what you're doing, and you genuinely care about it, that transitions over for other people to understand as well. It gets you excited. It makes you impactful. So I am now in the dry ice sector as one of our pillars of my organization. And the gentleman who runs the manufacturing side is the most passionate human being I have ever met on how dry ice is manufactured. He gets me excited about it because of the way that he cares about the molecular structure and how if you do it just 1 degree this way or whatnot, and he gets so excited about it because he cares. He cares about what he's doing, and his enthusiasm is absolutely contagious. So it doesn't matter really the what, it's more the why. Why is this important to somebody? Why will we want someone else to care about this? And so if you can make that personal and translate that in that dynamic, you can really impact your audience by showing how much you care. And again, that enthusiasm, it's just like, it's a momentum builder. It's like the snowball effect. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can translate that energy into other people. So then when we look at it being impact driven versus just some generic scenario, the stories that we use that make it personal, where we give real life experiences and we showcase things that have gone well, we showcase our failures, we showcase what's worked in life and what's been real makes so much more of an impact to people than using some generic scenario that's never really existed. When we make it personal, we make it a life experience, people can want to share into that life experience or make it much more relative to something that they have also experienced. So thinking about growing those roots and using some of the areas that you've experienced to grow your tree roots to share with others can really make that personalization impactful. This is my favorite. I love number 9, getting vulnerable. This has become a new age way of thinking. Thank you to Brene Brown for bringing this out. We've talked about shame over the past 20 years, and now we're talking about vulnerability. Because you know what? I don't know if anyone knows this, but none of us are perfect. And so we all have things. Again, we have our stories. But when you are able to get raw and talk about authenticity, that is where the power lies when you want to impact your audience. When we think about this, that authenticity, people can feel authenticity. This isn't a buzzword that you can just say, oh, I'm authentic. I am being authentic today. No, authenticity is like being real and being into those roots of your tree and exposing yourself for, yeah, you know what, my tree bent to the side one day because of a scenario that happened. I've gotten pretty raw lately in showcasing authenticity about one of my work injuries that I experienced when I was trying to do a single-legged squat, and I fell to the ground and sat there and cried like a baby. And it made me understand what injured workers go through in the workers' compensation space, because it wasn't just the fact I couldn't do a squat. It was all the other stuff that piled on with it. It was feeling weak and vulnerable, and that I wasn't going to be able to show up not only for myself, but then my daughter, my team, my job, what comes next. If my body's failing me, what are the other components that are going to fail me? And it was this just ridiculous wave of emotion that really hurt. But in that moment, that ridiculous moment of vulnerability, I completely rethought about how we talk to injured workers while we're going through the healing process, because it's not just at the beginning where people need that support. It's going through those healing moments. And when we feel like our body is failing us, it's not just the body that ends up suffering as a result. There's a lot of emotion and there is a lot of mental components that go into that. And so when we get raw and we share things like that with people that are like, hey, I have been in a situation like this too. It's going to be okay. Yeah. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to sit in the yuck for a little bit, but we want to make sure we can get you out of it. But feel your feelings. It's like an ocean wave. Like, we'll let those waves come and then let them go. We were so good at corporate speak for such a long time, where everything was going to be polished and perfect. And this is how I'm going to say, and I'm going to rehearse my speech, and it's going to go like this. And you know what? People were bored. People slept through it. They didn't want to come, and they got bored. The more authentic, the more real, the more life that you can drive into whatever message you're sending, whether it be, again, team meetings, educating your children, speaking publicly, whatever that looks like, the more reality, the more real you can be within that process, you can help people feel something where they can actually like feel what you were feeling, or they can feel, again, alive in that moment where you're actually making the most of the time, so that when they leave you from that interaction, it was worth having. And so when we think about this from like a human connection standpoint, you're trying to weave these pieces of connection together throughout this process. Whether we're looking at change management, we're looking at trying to teach something new, we're looking at different concepts or a sales pitch, etc. That connection, that cultivating that meaning and purpose behind whatever you're talking about is exactly what's needed to let people know that there is this human on the other side. This isn't just another BS presentation that's up here to just, here, I have to do this today. We're going to talk about general liability policy 42. It's actually like bringing into elements of, all right, let's talk about risk mitigation, or knowing your audience. If you're going to be sitting with, for example, farmers, and explaining, hey, here's your insurance policy. This is what this means to you. If you do not choose to mitigate some of your risks, or you don't choose to pay attention to what's going on with your people, or you're not going to choose to pay attention to your organizational culture, it is going to cost you X number of dollars, which translates into a combine or multiple combines, or you make it relatable to that audience that you are talking with, because people are going to hear things in a different way. I was actually talking, so we're in, like, my newer company is in the oil and gas sector. So when we talk about money, money is a very different concept in the oil and gas sector. If anyone's bought fuel lately, yeah, it's a little expensive. So money is a very different commodity in the oil and gas sector than it would be just like in your stereotypical corporate setting. And so when we're trying to connect pieces and we're trying to show meaningful data, it is going to look differently depending on what that audience looks like. And that wow factor or that impact factor that you need from that enthusiasm to try and cultivate change or get people to pay attention, it's going to look differently depending on where you're at and what your focal points are. So then you've got to look at it from the standpoint of, all right, so how am I going to make my audience pay attention so that they understand that if we go this route, we're going to choose to move or cultivate momentum that's going to drive behavioral patterns in a different direction? This is how it makes your business better. This is how it's going to impact our organization. This is how it's going to impact your people. And this is how the people are going to feel in return as a result of it. There is a very blurred line these days when it comes to that work-life balance. And so when we're trying to impact our audience, it isn't just impacting someone at work or impacting someone at home. That personal and professional dynamic ends up interchanging on a regular basis. So trying to cultivate all of those components and getting how we grow as a human being as a result of it is even more imperative. So when we share our vulnerabilities and we showcase what we have learned in a language that somebody else can understand, whether it be talking to a farmer about how many combines they can save by using their insurance policy in this capacity, you really shape shift depending on who you're talking to as a result of what behavioral pattern you want to derive out from this. What kind of influence? What does that look like for you personally? What does it look like for you professionally? And what do you expect people to feel when they walk away? And the best part of that vulnerability component is people remember your vulnerable moments, and they end up increasing your likability as a result of the fact that you were able to be vulnerable and open up on that front end. It also allows that human connection component because you are then seen as a real human being. You are seen as someone that can be relatable because of your authenticity and that vulnerability. And it's really throwing that corporate speak out the window because people will fall asleep when you start to go down that. We are going to be ridiculously polished and professional, not as much impact. And finally, evoking emotion. One of my favorite things, and you guys have ever heard my speech on humanity and workers' compensation, I like to end with the Dwayne Wade, this Buds for Three Budweiser commercial, because it is so powerful. At the very end, his mother says, "You are bigger than basketball." And she talks about how she's more proud of her son for the man he is than the basketball player that he was. And I love it because it's one of those moments that tugs at our heartstrings, because we all have wanted that moment where it's like, yes, your parent is telling you how proud they are. And it's one of those moments that you're just like, oh, if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. YouTube it. It's called like This Buds for Three. Fantastic. If you just need like a good pick me up, it's like a 4-minute video. It's fantastic. But those best speaking events or the best meetings or the best time periods where you're interacting with other people, that impacting your audience leaves people feeling something. You want to cultivate change, get people angry. You want to go get a group of feminists wound up, go talk to them about Roe versus Wade right now. Best connecting moments leave people feeling something. Whether it is that movement where it's like wanting to crawl out of your skin and go do something, to go change the world, whether it's pulling on your heartstrings and just leaving people with that moment that's like, whew, wow, that was powerful, that was impactful, or one that evokes memories, like childhood memories, or memories about things that have happened in the past and what you can do to help cultivate change so that memories like childhood can stay like that for children. Whatever it looks like, trying to evoke those emotions, happy, sad, joyful, anger, whatever it looks like, whatever your goal is, that impact, the more that you can actually impact your audience by evoking emotion, the more memorable that you will be and your message will be remembered. So with that, we have 10 minutes to go through our presentation styles. So there are 4 presentation styles that people tend to go back and forth with. You will probably have a dominant style, And you might have a secondary style that there's one that you feel more comfortable with. So how do you present? We've got the 4 distinct styles. They are commander, analyst, motivator, and facilitator. And as I joked earlier, I'm not a huge numbers person. Analyst is one I do not ever revert to. It's just not my jam. But I understand that in certain cases that I need a business, if I'm going to have to be explaining something in a business setting or very heavily analyzed on numbers or spreadsheets or charts or actuarial numbers, anything like that, when doing risk assessments, I know I need to pull in someone else because that is just not my speak and it's not something that I'm good at. So when we talk about looking at the mirror effect of knowing what are your go-to, what is your secondary communication style, and if you've got one that's weaker than the others, making sure you team up with somebody who you know can do this well. So let's talk about the commander. This is what you think. This is where the commander is, that commanding voice where they are here to educate the audience. It's more of a tell than a show type presentation, and they take advantage of being an exceptional presenter. They are captivating. They have executive presence in a way that is just very strong. And it's more of a tell people than to get them to see, feel, buy in. And so as we look at this, their style tends to be a lot more strong-willed. It is getting straight to the point, getting their point across. There are goals, there are action items. It's a very dominant presentation style. It moves fast and can be done in a very impatient pace. So if you've ever sat in a meeting with someone who has one of more of these commanding styles, you know when it's coming. Some of the strengths that exist in this type of presentation model is there is a lot of self-belief and confidence, tons of knowledge sharing. Again, this is more of that tell than it is the show. And there's a lot of focus on a specific message, and the credibility of this person's background is taken very seriously. There's a lot of opportunities, though. We're going to go through these with all 4 of them. This is where the opportunities in a commanding tone, we can all think of that when we think of like what a commander sounds like. When you hear that word command, they really could start paying attention to their tone, pitch, and pace, because there's a lot of communication again in those nonverbals or the verbals that are not about the message. This tends to be a little bit more rigid. If you think of a commander, a lot more corporate speak type, they could add some passion, some charisma, and use more stories to engage an audience, just that versus fact-based. Sometimes they don't identify with their audience as well as they could, and they could have an opportunity to take that audience on a journey throughout whatever the topic might be. Next up, you might be an analyst. What does the analyst do? All right, this is where we are relying on that data and facts and statistics. I love having in our business communications class, my favorite people are the actuaries, because if we can get an actuarial student or someone who is very numbers oriented to be able to be a good, effective communicator, that is like the holy mecca when you're looking at trying to drive organizational change with business cases and scenarios that are supported by objective findings. So an analyst, this is where we are looking at hardcore data, numbers, fact. They are going to be a little bit more on that perfectionist side. So this is where you can actually sometimes see people running through the script in their head, and they'll pause if they have messed up when they're doing their speaking of some capacity. They're like, oh, I forgot that. They're very perfectionist oriented, very structured, looking for things that are very detail oriented, how we concentrate on. This is exactly what the details are in the methodical fashion that they're presenting in. It's really hard to argue with facts. So when they come with that data's a friend. Everything is grounded in research usually, so they are a trusted source. But again, these guys are perfectionists, which can be fantastic, but can also be a big derailer on that. And so instead of looking at things from a less is more standpoint, these guys might dig into that data and those details and could potentially lose the audience as a result. So we try to get them opportunities by showing them that you can use slides sparingly, use them wisely to emphasize the points that you're trying to make, and get these people to relax, shake it out, and have a little bit of fun. Then there's the motivator. And this is the one that I tend to relate the most with. The motivator. This is the one, we're going to make sure that we go out of our way to make sure that we have a really good time while we're together. They like to be open and direct, center of attention, bring in that passion, purpose, enthusiasm, energy, and a desire to make people feel good. Absolutely. Like this is one of those, like you go to listen to someone speak about this, you're trying to impact your audience. Making people have a good, fun time while they're with you is a very important part for the motivator. Their style, they tend to move fast. We're here to like actually make something with the time that we have together. We're going to drive that motivating factors. Can be very undisciplined about time. I am always checking time to make sure that I am staying on our schedule because I know your time is valuable too. They can be very persuasive. This is where those vulnerability components come in, like when they are actually going to explain the why through stories and using vulnerability components to help get people to be persuaded upon the path that they're trying to impact you with. They can be very emotional. I like to call it passion, but some people are going to call it emotion. And how do you actually emotionally connect to people? So we've talked about trying to find those connecting pieces throughout the audience, driving those three factors. They're friendly and they like to tell stories. Strengths, they can connect, command attention, and keep things going. They like to be storytellers. This is where they're going to be able to, you're going to have a memorable experience because they're going to try and connect through their own stories or through stories of others, and they are remembered. So the opportunity, got to control those emotions and watch your time. And then also trying to make sure that things are done in a very logical approach where there is a lot more focus on that audience and how you can keep those key points as a focal point to keep your audience on track and coming with you. Last, and this is the one that this is my style that I tend to use very secondary, is the facilitator. And the facilitator, this is where we're going to try and get people on the side. We are trying to get a harmonious relationship where everybody involved is going to win. So this is that if you've ever seen The Office, this is the win-win-win scenario. Facilitators are really good at presenting. They're good natural communicators, and they become really gifted in this whole art of getting the buy-in and collectively getting people on board with the concepts and the information that's being shared. So they listen. They're active listeners. They're trying to support the learning of the people who are here. They have agreeable manner. Their temperament's great. They've got a solid tone, and they go out of their way to support the learning and the facilitation of the environment that they have created. They tend to be more patient. They're considerate. You know, this is where that likability factor comes in. And they like to get on the same side with people and make friends. So their strengths, they can build relationships. They also have a really good emotional intelligence background. They're able to understand what's going on from an empathy standpoint of what are people feeling, seeing, watching, paying attention to the human behavior within their dynamic. And they have a passion for people to help drive that influence to get people on their side. They do tend to get to the point a little bit more quickly, or this is an opportunity area for them. They could take more risks, but remember, this is where the facilitator tries to be in that likability factor, and to get everybody to like them means that they're not going to be as risky as maybe they should be to try and really impact that audience. They can be seen as oversensitive, and sometimes they need to get beyond that comfort zone so they can actually make that impact that is needed. And sometimes they get uncomfortable and they have to state unpopular opinions. So some things to think about. Maybe you resonate with one of those. Maybe you tend to blend or you bounce back and forth depending on the audience that you need to present to. So with that, impacting your audience, more so than anything, tell a story in only a way that you can do it. Because the way that you present versus the way that I present versus the way that Mari presents, or Nicole or Marin, since I can see you guys on my screen right now, what that looks like, own that, because there is no other you. And the passion and the purpose and the drive that you demonstrate to someone might be exactly what that audience member needs. Because if you can bring your passion-filled purpose with the why, people are going to get excited about whatever you're talking about. So get excited, go captivate some audiences, and more than anything, never pick a topic that you cannot have fun with. And with that, I know we're almost there. Got 1 minute. Just want to thank you guys for your time as we zipped through this today.